Right, okay then. So folks, welcome to this virtual reality in Scottish schools seminar, which is part of the Scottish Learning Festival seminar programme. This session will last about 45 minutes, so I'm going to do a quick 10-minute kind of scene setting in terms of VR, something about what the research suggests, something about how it's used in schools before we move on to our educator panel. And in our educator panel, I've got Robert Baldie from Forfar Academy, Simon Luxford-Moore from ESMS through in Edinburgh, Ian Stuart, Global Head of Education at Avantis, and Dale Murphy, PTC Technologies from West Calder High School. Can I just say before I begin that there will be product, tools and apps mentioned throughout this this presentation, and obviously in the next 45 minutes, where they are referenced or mentioned, that doesn't mean that in any shape or form we're endorsing the use of those products, but there's just no way that you can get away with talking about virtual reality and tech without mentioning certain certain technologies. Just a quick reminder before I begin, these sessions are being recorded for public viewing, so post-event you will be able to go in, you can look at the viewing, you can share the links to the recording with other colleagues. And if you could please turn off your microphone and your camera when you're not speaking. If you can use the chat pane to make a comment or ask a question, and I and other colleagues will keep an eye on the chat pane and we can raise those questions towards the end of the session. If you lose connection, simply log back in again. And can I just say to my colleagues that if my screen does go blank, just take up please from where I left off. And if you want to tweet about this this session, if you use the hashtag SLF22, and again, just to reinforce, the views and opinions that you'll hear expressed over the next 40-45 minutes are personal and individual views. Just some quick definitions to begin with. You will hear various terms lobbied around. So augmented reality, mixed reality, extended reality seems to be a term that's that is more commonly being used across the system. So in terms of this session, virtual reality is an experience that is immersive. The learner enters a computer simulated environment, typically using a specialist headset. When you start talking about emergent technologies, I think it's as well to remember VR has got a long history. Go back to 1956, the first VR machine was a machine called Sensorama. You move forward to the 1980s and the 1990s, and the gaming industry begins to adopt VR in a big way, and we all know there's loads of technologies out there that start off as games-based technologies or business-based technologies, but then find their way into teaching and learning. In 2010, somebody called Palmer Luckey created the prototype of the Oculus Rift VR headset, and we know where that went. 2012 onwards, Sony and Samsung are beginning to develop VR headsets. Google releases its cardboard viewer for smartphones that was incredibly popular in schools. And by 2016 onwards, literally hundreds of companies are developing VR applications, and a smaller number of companies actually developing the headsets themselves. So can I just say the reality of presenting this seminar, it can be quite daunting because I'm head of emerging technologies, and very often, what do you mean by an emerging technology? Sometimes there's an issue that emerging tech can be seen as something of a toy, a trivial toy, and I think that's certainly the case in terms of VR headsets. In other cases, the potential can be understood, but not really the way in which the technology, the emerging technology, can be applied in a classroom level, and the impact that it's going to have on teaching and learning. Very often, people misunderstand what technologies will thrive, which ones will be popular, which ones will thrive and survive, and sometimes we get everything right except the actual timing. I can give you a specific example of this. Back in 2002, 2003, the school that I was based in, we were using tablet devices. It was a device that was produced by research machines, and it was just too early for its time, to be honest with you. If it had been a few years later, you know, with the introduction of the iPad, it would have taken off big time. So I think that's a good example of a technology that, to a certain extent, was ahead of its time. What makes technological transformation difficult to predict, and I think any kind of transformation in teaching and learning, it's the fact that it isn't just one thing that leads to that adoption. It isn't just one thing that leads to us teaching and learning in a different way. You know, very often it's the way that loads of different elements come together. So, and there's a quick example of that there. So, you know, in terms of VR, the enablers, virtual reality is becoming more accessible. There are more headsets out in the market. The technology is getting simpler to use. The technology is getting cheaper, and all those connectivity issues are gradually being worked through and resolved. Some of the challenges, there are still challenges around connectivity, especially in a classroom context. I think very much we're trying to understand what conduct in a virtual world looks like, and the kind of advice and support that we need to give to learners. And if you open the press any day of the week, you will see issues around, you know, what I've called murky moral practices online. Whole range of issues in terms of how we tackle those. Big issue in terms of the argument that, well, it's technology, some of the technology is expensive, and therefore it's only for the few, it's only for the small number of schools and authorities that can afford to adopt it. And then there's a whole range of health issues around the use of VR as well. And I think it is fair to say that if you look at any manufacturer of any headset, there's quite extensive and detailed advice around those health issues. Why do I think, so personal view, why do I think VR is a game changer in education? I think it's a game changer because of the immersive experience, because once in a virtual world, things do change, and virtual reality changes learner perceptions in a way, and I'm aware I can be challenged on this, but it does change learner perceptions in a way that no other technology does. In terms of VR in education, I would argue that for it to be a success, and I think if you're a classroom teacher, you know this already, it has to be easy to use. It needs to be as immersive as possible. You need to be able to evaluate the progress that's being made in terms of learning. It needs to tell a good story, and it needs to adapt to learner needs. You know, there must be some way that you can individualize and personalize that learning experience. There is a web link at the bottom of that screen there, and Steve Banbury has done a lot of work in the States around VR and the application of VR in education. He's come up with a 4-stage model in terms of the adoption and the implementation of VR in a classroom setting, and that's everything from stage 1, where VR really is just the learners are passive viewers in terms of what they experience, all the way through to stage 4, where you see a tremendous amount of social collaboration. It's the collaboration that improves the learning, and learners really have a genuine sense that they are in a unique learning space in terms of the way that they interact with other teachers and learners. Steve has also worked up elements of virtual reality and how you can map that across to Bloom's taxonomy. So I certainly would say, if you get a chance, check out his work and check out his website. There's some really useful information and details in there around VR and how you can map it across to teaching and learning. There are a whole range of free and paid-to-use apps out there in the system, and I've just illustrated a few there: the Trench Experience, Apollo 11, the Anne Frank House, I'm going to reference later in the presentation, and Travelling While Black. But I think it's fair to say that for most curriculum areas, there does exist a VR solution. For me, I think, and this is what really makes it powerful in a classroom setting, there's also the potential for teachers to create their own content. So, a few weeks ago, I went out to the Lithgow Palace with a 360 camera and created some content that could be used in class on a VR headset. And that, to me, is the real strength of those headsets. It's the way that teachers can create their own content and then cater that content to their own individual contexts in class. Just to wrap up, in terms of a kind of Scottish context, 2018 onwards, East Renfrewshire Council was the first education authority in the UK to roll out VR headsets to its primary and secondary schools. So they basically provided a class set of VR headsets to every primary and secondary school in the authority. Bob Baldie's here with us today, and I think later I might ask Bob to reflect on some of these experiences. But you've got classrooms like his classroom in Forfar Academy, where they've really integrated and embedded the use of virtual reality headsets across a whole range of topics, and themes and contexts. Stuart Melville, ERS. That's right. I'm saying the right thing there, Simon, aren't I? You're going to correct me later.
ESMS, yep.
So again, and one of the reasons that Simon is here, I think they've successfully embedded the use of those headsets, across classes and across the curriculum. If you move to a West Lothian context, the West Lothian Inclusion and Support Services are using VR headsets, with teachers to support practitioner understanding of additional support needs amongst learners. And again, we've got Dale and colleague from West Calder High School. West Calder High has used VR headsets in their widely recognised Holocaust education programme. And again, I'd reference the Anne Frank app. If anybody gets a chance, it's a free app. Go in and check it out. I think that's an excellent example of the use of VR in Holocaust education. And lastly, Leavenworth High are working on a DYW project with a local employer, again developing work experiences, again using what I've referenced already, that 360 camera. And there is a piece of research out there in terms of virtual reality in early education. It's a research paper from St Andrews University, and it describes an S1 project that explores the cathedral and the cathedral nowadays, and a virtual representation of what it looked like back in the Middle Ages. And students are able to navigate their way through the through the cathedral. So I think it's well worth visiting that piece of research. Now, I know I've rabbited through that because, to be honest with you folks, that was just a bit of context in terms of VR use. What I'm going to move into now is our panel discussion, and if I can just finish sharing here, folks, I'm going to move into the panel itself. So as I say, I've got Ian, Dale and colleague, Simon, and Bob Baldie, and there's a number of questions that we're going to consider over this next 20-25 minutes. Again, feel free to put questions into the chat, and we can pose those questions to the panel as well. So I was going to kick off, Simon, with you. I mean, the first question that I was going to pose was, why would you integrate VR into your teaching? If I'm a cynic or I just want to know more, how would you convince me that VR should be used? What are the benefits?
I'd say your quotation from Ball that you mentioned earlier about timing and it being multiple factors. The why can only happen when that how part does come together. There needs to be either a need or a very clear value. And for me at ESMS, it was about the value. I'm a primary school teacher, 21 years now in teaching, 5 now as head of e-learning, but my primary school has definitely given me the best platform to realize the impact of experiential learning. We could do a raise your hand in the reactions here, but how many people here today can remember being told by a parent to be back home for tea when it got dark? Just raise your hand if you've ever been told that, right? I'm not going to do a sort of chronology assessment here, but I guarantee you that a lot of younger people, perhaps in the audience, won't have heard that expression and might have even had chills to think that children are out and about without any sort of supervision until it got dark. But you know what? It did give you an experience. If you ask me now to write a story based in the woods at night, I could tell you, I could use emotional vocabulary, I could set the scene for you. And as a teacher, I found that there were times I was asking my children, particularly with language, to write something to engage in a lesson, and I'd already put a barrier up there because they didn't have the experience I did as the educator. And differentiation is it's a buzzword that's maybe now starting to come back to the front of pedagogy these days. But certainly when I trained as a teacher, you had to really think carefully about the engagement of every learner in your class. And the beauty of virtual reality, augmented reality, is I certainly from experience have found you do engage everyone in that class, because depending on what sort of learning strengths they have, what form of stimulus is the best way to engage them to therefore allow them to achieve and to attain whatever success in your lesson, putting them in a context where they can actually remember having done it takes away all that theory that you might have to simply rely on, because you lose about 2/3 of your class when you give them a theoretical situation to be in without any sort of experience in there. So why integrate VR? I would probably say nowadays, why wouldn't you? You mentioned about cost being possibly a factor, but actually VR for us has removed boundaries for cost because school trips. It has surfaced some of those little blimps that we could have had during COVID with other physical boundaries in the world. So religious boundaries. We can take children to Mecca. They don't have to be Muslims, but they can develop a far better sense of empathy. There are so many benefits to it that we found just from experience. I can't claim for everyone that actually has made a valuable part of our curricula now. It never leads our curricula, but it's there to support it.
Simon, thanks for that. West Calder High colleagues, Dale, I was going to ask you to come in to see if you had anything to contribute to that or add to that.
Like, I think certainly for us, we don't have a huge number of VR headsets because of the nature of the ones that we had purchased. But we had been using them quite substantially down in technologies for a range of things. Actually starting way back when it was the headsets that you bought and slid your phone in and you used Google Expeditions. We had been using them as far back as that. Like I say, bought a different model and spent quite a bit of money on this model. We've got 3 sets of them, and the impact that has in a classroom setting is great. It gets the kids really engaged. It also it enthuses them and excites them in the discussion, so they're much more kind of able to take part in the discussion, much more are more excited about their learning. I would say the barrier for me is the fact that perhaps we don't have a huge number of sets, which is something that we would probably be looking to expand. But in terms of the learning and teaching, it really just to supplement Simon's point is that it kind of just throws the kids right into the centre of the learner experience, rather than you kind of dictating a story from the front of your room.
And I suppose it's interesting, Dale, that, you know, when I was up visiting the Explorer Scouts in West Calder, one of the lads who's at West Calder High and does history, it was the first thing he talked about in terms of history. You know, it was that use of the VR headset, and I think the Anne Frank app and all that, and just the difference that had made in terms of engaging him.
Well, this is the thing. Kirsten kind of takes the lead in our Holocaust education, so she might be able to fill you in a wee bit more into terms of the kind of Anne Frank experience with the kids.
So we actually got level 1 in Vision School in Scotland for our Holocaust education, and we've got different Holocaust ambassadors from second year, and they're the kids that we are training up on how to use the virtual headset so that they can go in and be peer teaching to younger kids, even kids older than them, going in and saying this is an experience that we've done. It's getting people excited about something that's still a major topic and still a major factor within people's lives now, the discrimination which goes on within society. So it's giving them an insight into what's going on, it's giving them an experience, it's making learning and teaching accessible for all, because you don't need to be a good writer or a good reader to go on and do a VR. If you do that, there's so many different ways you can then use technology. We can record our answers, and it's exactly what Simon is saying, it's these experiences that some kids within the school might never have. So going to see Anne Frank's house and going to be in the trenches and, right, okay, can you now write me a 4-mark describe question about what the conditions of the trenches are? Yes, because I've been there, I've experienced it, I've actually been immersed in it, and I'll remember it, because it goes into their heads a lot more, especially with the mass amount of technology that we're bringing into school. Like, if you don't keep up to date with it, you're going to lose kids' interest, especially for history, which is a very literacy-based subject. We need to make sure it's accessible to all pupils and they're all succeeding and they're all participating.
Bob, how about you? Anything you want to add to that? And Bob's broadcasting from his classroom, by the way, folks. So if you do see youngsters passing by and all that and giving them a wave, that's why. I think, Bob, you're on mute. We're so used to saying that in terms of lockdown, haven't we? In terms of Teams.
Yeah, we're about a year into our journey now, Jim. So it's been an absolute great journey. It's been a brilliant experience, and it was all sort of come from the COVID recovery. You know, what experiences the kids have missed out in 2 years. You know, so the first thing we looked to do in engineering is take them down to the Forth Road Bridge, and we couldn't do that. You know, and it's a tremendous experience getting that height and the vertigo and stuff like that. So putting the headsets on straight away, you're there. You know, it's you're getting all that experience of emotions and empathy with what's going on around you. You know, it's just it's so good. It's like being there. So we've built on that experience and learning from experience. You know, we've only got 12 headsets, but we've tried to use it right through the year with different things to great effect. You know, the kids have got their headsets on with the package, the learning package we've got. We can monitor what they're on. There are no sneaky games. They're immersed in it. You can talk to them and direct their learning from beside them. You know, you can go look a bit to the left and you'll see this. It's really good. We use it as a carousel thing because we've got 12 headsets. So well, they've got 10 people on them. The other 10 are doing something else, and they're listening in and stuff like that. So when it's their shot, they're more clued in. So kids are the most common word they used with them is wow, and it's from kids that would never sort of have money to buy these sets. You know, so it's a great leveler in bridging the gap. You know, so. I can't praise VR enough, just from the type of direct learning you get from them. You know, it's amazing.
Thanks, Bob. Ian, you must have experience, Ian, I mean, across a whole range of schools, not just within Scotland, but kind of globally. Anything you want to add to what's been said?
Absolutely. I mean, every teacher in the world has used the phrase, imagine yourself in. Every one of us has done that. And if the kids don't have that reference point or a methodology to go into that, they have no context. And context in learning is absolutely everything. If they can't imagine themselves as an engineer, they won't become an engineer. Discussion we were having around that yesterday, and women in engineering. If they can't see themselves within that context, they can never understand. The other part is to allow those experiences and understanding and emotional connections to those. There's a theory of empathy engines in VR. So the idea is that you give people an understanding as a different perspective, and all the speakers have talked about that, around that, I should say. But that is making such a difference. So teacher in Australia of 3 and 4 year olds trying to give their kids an experience of what snow is, you know. And what the best part to that was, the kids were in the headsets, they were experiencing snow, but they then put their hands in the cold and felt it as well. The teacher had actually put it in place. So it's not just about being in an experience, it's that connection to the experience and that empathetic point that you go into.
Thanks, Ian. Right. Dale, I'm going to come back to West Calder High. Simon, I was going to ask you this next question, but I'm going to go to West Calder High first because it'll be quite interesting to do a comparison here. In West Calder High, how do you prepare teachers and learners for that VR experience? And I suppose when I say teachers, well, yeah, I'll leave it at that. How do you prepare teachers and learners to actually use the kit and get the best out of it?
I think for the teachers to begin with, we'd organised. It was kind of like a digital skill up event where we got people. So our school set up as collaboratives, so rather than just simply being departments. So we took it collaborative at a time. So we've got humanities and languages, wellbeing, and STEAM. So we brought the collaborative down as a whole. To try a range of different digital tools that we've got on offer and available in the school. We are a fully digital school, so a lot of your resources and stuff are all online and things like that. Every kid's on a one-to-one device. So bringing that up to the kind of next level of, so let's make it a proper immersive experience. So what's really nice is, or what we've learned, is getting the teachers down and seeing how easy it was. Every teacher's got their own iPad, so the device that we use, we can obviously track what the people are seeing in their goggles via the iPad, and we were casting the iPad to our boards. So even the kids that are working in the groups are able to see what the other people are experiencing, and they're able to talk about it if you're doing a couple of different experiences. So bringing teachers down, and actually there's not a lot that goes into it. And I think it was just to put the ease that once you start, it is pretty simple.
Yeah.
In terms of the kids, that's just, it comes kind of second nature to them, because all you're doing is you've got a different brand name on it, but in their head it's PlayStation or Xbox, you know what I mean? That they're kind of putting and engaging in, so they're more clued up than what we are. And actually what was quite funny is a lot of the apps and stuff that we've used, we haven't sourced ourselves. Kids have come in and told us about them and how we could use them, and that's how we've actually we kind of incorporated it. So using a lot of it across the school, and especially I think what's now been recognised is we use the kids a lot in our curriculum development. So certainly in science there, we brought people in and we were saying, you know, how could we use it? And they were talking about looking at inside the body, and there was some virtual reality where you're kind of doing your journey through the body. It was a bit of, I'm sure there was a film about that at one point. So it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids inside somebody. But yeah, so that's certainly, and obviously Kirsten from up in social, like the social subjects department, it kind of comes very quickly, second nature as compared to other technologies.
It's a lot about pupil voices, and what they're saying is, what do you think this could be used for? How could this enhance your experience in learning from the kids? Because as they're saying, we are now fully technology, and I can't go into a class and say I'm a full-on expert, because it would be a lie, and the kids can see right through that. But they also need to see your errors and using these, and some of them are so helpful. Like, Miss, if you try this, or you've done the amount of things I've learned from kids, from just going, I can't do that, and that's you physically showing them. We all make mistakes, we all need to learn things. It's a learning curve that everyone's taking. So yeah, working alongside the kids and actually putting them at the centre of their learning and showing this is about you, how is this going to aid you? This is not just a new fancy tool that we've decided just to chuck in for the sake of it.
It was the one, just going back, and it's kind of a wee kind of funny story about the kids, as Kirsten's saying, is I was using it in higher business one year. We were talking about guerrilla marketing, so we had given them, and at that point, like I'm sure it was like the Blair Witch Project had been, it was a reboot, and they had did as part of their guerrilla marketing campaign a VR. So I said to them, right, if we get through these questions, we'll get a shot of this, so everybody's a game for it. And they're like, sir, join in. So me and my innocence and naivety puts the headset on with it. And they're like, oh, you need to turn, you need to keep turning. And obviously at one point you turn and the kind of character jumps out at you. But at the same time, one of the kids had grabbed me to give me a fright, and actually I don't think I ever got to live that down the rest of the year. So yeah, it's a really, really kind of good immersive experience.
Yeah, and there's one, I mean, important point there, you know, Dale, I think from Glasgow University, they said that, yeah, if you want people to learn about VR, get them to start off with the games, to be honest with you. You know, the games will get you used to using it and the apps and all of that before you then move on. Simon, do you want to come in with anything around that?
I think the one of the points that Dale and Kirsten mentioned there is you've got to have the wow at the beginning. And I know Ian mentioned that word. It's so true. As soon as you experience it, as a teacher, a good teacher with the creative juices flowing, you can see where the value will come in. You will see where there are children in your classes that would benefit from that experience in their learning. In terms of preparing teachers, initially, that's what I did. It was the wow. I didn't tell them much about it. They knew it was coming because we'd had, like Dale, we'd had some experience of Google Expeditions about 10 years ago now, when we moved to the Avantis, class Avantis technologies that we're using now. I put them in a shark dive. And there was one member of staff, I will remember, who actually held her breath because psychosomatics kick in. You know, if I'm underwater, I should hold my breath. And that, I pointed out to everyone afterwards, that was the impact. That was the realism for her. And in terms of a day-to-day preparation, we sort of developed our own sort of code of good practice. Again, you touched on, Jim, there about some health and safety concerns. A lot of them, I think, are misuse that can cause them, because we do have children with epilepsy that can safely use our headsets. Again, the ones we've chosen have a certain frame per second that doesn't trigger photosensitive epilepsy. But in, say, a 1 hour lesson, we will only ever use the headsets for, say, 15, 20 minutes max, and only 5 minutes at a time. So the headsets come off, they're back in the room, they're working out of jotters, or they're working on laptops, they're in discussion. Now, for us, that serves two purposes. One, it does allow us to keep track of children who might be feeling a little bit motion sensitive, or can get quite hot or too physically involved in it that it's getting a bit too much for them, and some might need a bit of time to regulate as well out of that. But importantly, it also makes us keep in context that the devices or the technology is there to enhance and support, not lead the learning. And I always, and again, the very first time I introduce this to my staff, and I do it as reminders, I want them to bear in mind when children leave their class, and like Bob's class left just before this, they all said goodbye and thank you, Mr. Baldie. You want children to leave your class and say, thanks very much for the history lesson. Thanks very much for the language lesson, not thanks for the VR lesson. Because if you get that, then the technology has become forefront. And again, you know, logistically, teachers, if the technology fails and that's your main focus, your lesson's kiboshed. If the technology fails and it was only there as an added enhancement, learning and teaching still carries on. And for us, it was about making sure that the ed tech always fills the gaps, always raises the awareness and enhances the experience, never dictates or leads it. And I think if you can keep that in the back of your mind, you'll prepare people really well for using any sort of technology, but certainly VR.
Bob, following on from that, you know, and some of the things that Simon and Dale have mentioned, how do you engage with parents and carers to kind of explain the benefits and maybe some of the concerns? Because I could well imagine, can I just say, I'm a historian, and in terms of Holocaust education, I could well imagine somebody said, "Whoa a minute, you know, gamification of the Holocaust? Don't think so." And West Calder High, I know that isn't the case, by the way, but you know, I've heard those things, you know, externally. So how do you, with a kind of parent and carer audience in mind in particular, how do you kind of sell it or explain to them the benefits?
Yeah, we've done it in a number of levels. We'll have an S1 sort of S1 in a nutshell event, which is very good, and it brings in parents to talk to you. We've set up little stalls, so we've got our sort of VR goggles set up. So we've got we had them set up in two sort of sections. So we had the learning experience where you go in to learn specific things. One of the things that we do a lot on is what we did with COP26 was we looked at materials and how they go into the ocean and deforestation and the effect in that. So they can go in and look at that learning. So it's an immersive journey. There's no games to be had. The only thing that you're going to experience is learning. So you go into sort of videos or Advantis World where there's scenes where you can discover, you know, plastic in the waste and the effect of plastic in the waste, so you can analyse what's happening and you can evaluate what's happening. So all these higher order thinking skills, they're coming out all the time. The other aspect is you can create the wow yourself with a 360 camera. So part of the journey I was on, I did a practitioner inquiry on care experienced children at primary school in transition. So I was looking at the confidence of kids transitioning with a VR sort of session with myself, knowing what to expect, and they're, wow, there's the swimming pool. Oh, we've been there before, but it was only on a Saturday morning and stuff like that. So it really puts them at ease. The other things that we do and we could demonstrate to the teachers was the DIY sort of factory visits and the learning you get from that. So that put them into a context that could understand, and the wow factor come out there as well. So they can see it straight away. You know, we had to wrestle headsets off some of the parents so the kids could get a show. Yeah, so on board, once you use it, you're totally on board. I think it's probably going back to the first time I've seen a PowerPoint, you know, go, wow, you can really see the learning benefits of this for children, you know, and there's no ads coming in or anything. It's pure, direct, controlled sort of learning. Yeah, so great feedback from parents and carers.
Ian, just to follow on from what Bob said there, you know, how do you assess whether an app is suitable for use in an education setting? Because again, you will have tons of experience of this across the piece.
Absolutely, and it's about that pedagogical guidance and control that becomes the forefront. What are you trying to achieve? Don't get me wrong, I love the shark experience. I get scared the bejesus out of me as well. I actually saw a teacher spraying water on each other during a teacher session, by the way, so they get the full experience. And another one in the jungle who was getting hit by leaves at the same time by their colleagues, so they get the full experience. But in terms of apps, what's your pedagogy? What's your learning outcome? And then decide what the experience is going to be that matches that or takes them to a different place. I actually was in a lesson in Simon's school with Jamie, watching a lesson, and what I loved about the lesson plan, it did not mention VR at all. The purpose of the lesson was literacy. Then the resources were put in place, including any apps that were required, and then the measurement of outcome and impact. And I'm sure with West Calder High School, it has a purpose And what that purpose is the key part. Now, the affordances that new technology can give you is the other thing you do need to evaluate. What new opportunities come out of that? So you don't want to repeat exactly what you do. You want to build it and then say, well, actually, you know what? We could take them to the Mars base and they could explore Mars, or they could hold whole solar systems in their hands. And these all become the opportunities. So actually, the biggest problem I find is finding that hook for the teacher to connect to what they're doing now, and then they start building. And actually, these two guys have both done that I've seen, and I'm sure West Calder have done that as well.
I would say, sorry, Jim, on the back of what Ian's saying there, for anyone who thinks, oh, I need to justify suitability for an app, I'd say invest in a piece of hardware and software in a company that actually listen to you as teachers. Because I can say hand on heart, I can go onto the particular portal that we use, and the resources there are either made by myself and other teachers who are contributing back, or they're made by people in that company who also have an education background, and they've listened to what we say. And, you know, there's gaps in this. I'd love to be able to take my class to Jacobite Edinburgh in 1742. They're listening, and if they can create that, that gives you the reassurance you need as well.
So Simon, following on from that, and I'm going to work my way around the screen here. You know, I suppose it's a question any teacher would ask. How do you assess learning? Now, I think I know what the answer is that I'm going to get from all of you. I'll be interested to see if it is an answer. West Calder High, I'm going to put you on the spot straight away. How do you evaluate and assess the kind of learning that's taking place?
So I think what's really important there is what we were touching on is the fact that it's about the pedagogical approach that the VR is supporting, and not what the VR is there. That isn't the intended purpose. It's the pedagogy and the learning and teaching that's been brought into focus with that as a platform or as a tool. So with that said, when you're saying how do you measure the success, well, the VR experience is part of the process rather than the final outcome. So actually, is the success here in English that you've got a much more descriptive essay? Is the story, is the success here in science that people are now actually able to talk about body functions and cells, things like that, a much deeper impact? I know certainly in the way that we originally, how it all kind of started off for us was when we were doing the Google expeditions way back, and it was for the operations topic, which sometimes kids can feel a wee bit dry because you're talking about quality assurance and things like that. And we brought that in, and it was, I'll never forget it because it was 3 different purpose-built bits, and it was around Mackey's ice cream. And it was their quality assurance. It was about them using the windmills and all of the renewable energy they were using. And all of a sudden, you went from kids that were like, oh, I hate this topic, to fully expanded answers, because when you were then talking about the theory, you were relating that for the real life. And I think going right back to the start, what we were talking is that Simon had mentioned that, you know, we all have experiences as adults and we can quite clearly visualize. We're trying to now build that bridge so that these young people that are now in front of us who don't have the same experiences that we once did, we're bridging that gap back with the use of virtual reality in the hopes that they're using then that experience to make the learning more purposeful, which makes the outcome much more successful. Do you want to?
I would also say that you can measure success by saying, are they engaged? Because success means a different thing to everyone. You might have kids coming into a class who will sit for a full lesson, they'll not pick up a pencil, they'll not log on to their OneNote, they do not want to be there. If you can have a successful lesson where you're getting them engaged, they are verbally communicating with you, they're verbally getting excited, then that's what it's all about. For me, it really comes down to, well, what are you measuring as success? What do you want out of that? Because it's the right tool for the right purpose in the right place, especially in a digital school. I don't always use the OneNote and that. I'll get them onto paper and then they're taking pictures of it. It's how are you getting them engaged? How are you seeing that passion come into them? And then that shows in their work and the stuff that you're doing. It's using it as a tool. You create your lesson, and then can that enhance my lesson by any way? Can that help aid their learning? And that's where you bring it in. So as it's definitely a measure of success of, well, what are you measuring?
Bob, anything you want to add to that? Bob, you're on.
Muted again.
I'm still loving this.
Certainly with summative assessment, the classes that use VR stand out a mile, you know, just with verbal questioning and stuff like that. I would go to say that their actual work and their graphic work and their folio work's more creative as well, just as an observation, just because they're more switched on with it. They've seen the problem with polar ice caps melting. They've seen deforestation. They know the problems. They're more passionate about what they're learning. So put that wee bit more extra into it, and it comes out in questioning straight away. You know, and they're really motivated about the subject. You know, so it's a game changer, certainly for me. You know, using it as a tool, a teaching tool anyway. Yeah.
Simon, any last thoughts on that?
What they said, and which is really great, is that actually we're all thinking and saying the same thing here, because you can measure a criteria for content that's improved for the emotional connections, but you know, even their attainment, I've found in my experience, they're turning up to class sharper, because there is that element of fun and engagement with it. And when they leave, they're usually talking about what it was they've done. So they're sort of consolidating. It takes it beyond the classroom. And you will get children going home saying to parents, which was another earlier question about engaging them, they'll talk about what they did today, where they went. It's like being on a school trip every time. They share it. It's fun.
Right, listen, I'm aware of the time here. I'm going to give you all 15 seconds each. If you think about the future in terms of future developments in VR, is there one thing that you would want to stress, or one thing that you would want to see happening? And I'm going to start with Ian.
I want to see teachers sharing their experiences across the world. So one of the things I would definitely encourage people to buy, we don't sell it, so it's not a sales pitch, is a 360 camera, because that is one of the things that changes massively.
Right. Okay, Ian. Dale?
Mute.
I was hoping that wouldn't happen to me. I think that, to be honest, just more people becoming engaged with it and not seeing it. I think right now it's seen as a fad.
Yeah.
So I think the discussion here today has been excellent in terms of what we've all been saying. You know, it's about using that to make the curriculum elsewhere much more accessible. And I think kind of broadening that reach of that understanding would be excellent.
Bob?
I was a wee bit inspired by a trip down to ESMS at the weekend there. So my own journey will be deeper into 360 sort of things with ThingLink and more creation of videos and stuff like that, because I really see the value in it. You know, that there's learning journeys there that you can just jump on board with as well. It's just good.
Okay. Simon?
15 seconds is tough, Jim, but I'm going to say pastoral support. We've all talked about supporting academic areas, curricular areas. I'm going to be starting a little research project on how we can look at more of the pastoral support for children with transition, with additional neurodivergencies as well, allowing better time in the classroom, not out of the classroom, needing to regulate. The future's very exciting for VR, though, I will say.
Thanks, Simon. And I think that neatly tails into my last couple of slides. So here we are, VR the future. There's obviously going to be advances in headsets. There'll be new VR accessories. And it was a word that I learned in doing a bit of research around this. So haptics. And that's it's the kind of the touchy, feely, physical experience that you can embed into VR use. And obviously, I need to mention the metaverse, because that is the whatever it is, but there's a good definition there of the metaverse. It will be interesting over this next 5-10 years to see whether we move into that kind of scenario that is described there. Folks, I've got 1 minute to go, and can I just say thanks for that. I think we could easily have rattled on for a lot longer. But Ian, West Calder High folks, Simon, Bob, thanks very much for that, and I'll catch up with you at some point. I'll put my details in the chat if anybody wants to get in touch, and then I can feed information through to you unless they get in touch with you directly. And there we are, 13:15. How's that for good timing?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks again, then, folks. Have a good day. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.